Xi Jinping was out of the public eye for 30 days, only reappearing on August 19th. This has sparked widespread speculation. Some foreign observers suggest Xi may have had a stroke and is now recovering. A video aired on Vietnamese television showed an L-shaped scar on the lower right side of Xi's head, possibly from surgery, perhaps a minimally invasive craniotomy to remove a blood clot. These observations led some to speculate about a stroke, although others point out that when Xi met Mark Zuckerberg in 2015, the scar wasn't there. Experts argue that surgical scars usually don't heal so quickly, indicating that if Xi had surgery, it's likely happened years ago rather than recently. Beyond health concerns, there are also rumors that some party seniors are seizing this moment to pressure Xi, urging him to reduce his control over economic matters or even to consider political reforms. However, this theory seems equally far-fetched. The Chinese Communist Party's political system is deeply intertwined with the interests of the top families, making any reforms risky for them. It's doubtful they would push the leader in such a way. So why did she vanish for a full month? Some believe the authorities are deliberately steering public attention away from more critical decision-making processes. Late July coincided with the Paris Olympics, offering a perfect moment for Xi to stay out of the public spotlight while plotting significant actions behind the scenes. Following the Olympics, a series of corruption scandals involving officials and their mistresses emerged. While official corruption and such scandals are well known, some believe these revelations are a part of a CCP tactic to distract the public. It's becoming clear that Xi's absence wasn't just about his health or internal power struggles. Some speculate that during this time he may have been meeting with senior figures to discuss ways to handle the current crisis and ensure stability. What is the CCP really up to behind closed doors? Some believe the party is secretly preparing for war. If these preparations were made public, it could lead to a lack of support among the Chinese population, or worse, resistance or even attempts to flee. To prevent this, the CCP has been using media tactics to ensure the public remains unaware of future plans, helping maintain its control. The international situation is undoubtedly putting pressure on China. Initially, the CCP hoped to disrupt the West by creating chaos in the United States, encouraging Russia to wage war in Europe, and using Iran to distract the US in the Middle East. However, these strategies haven't gone as planned. Donald Trump may be returning to the political scene, Russia is facing setbacks in Ukraine, and Iran remains threatened by Israel. In this context, the Biden administration approved a highly classified nuclear strategy in March known as the Nuclear Employment Guidance. This plan calls for the US to prepare for coordinated nuclear threats from China, Russia, and North Korea, particularly focusing on China's rapidly expanding nuclear arsenal. Geopolitical analysts believe this makes a shift in US nuclear policy from retaliatory actions to possible preemptive strikes. Should any of these countries be seen as a threat, the US could launch attacks on all three simultaneously. In recent years, China and Russia have held many joint military exercises. With Russia's help, North Korea has frequently tested missiles. North Korea now has more than 60 nuclear warheads and other nuclear materials. This is despite former President Trump's prediction that Kim Jong-un would give up his nuclear weapons after their meetings. Additionally, both North Korea and Iran have provided conventional weapons to Russia. These factors have caused Washington to rethink its strategy. One striking development is how quickly China is expanding its nuclear arsenal. China initially planned to have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030 and 1,500 by 2035. Which would be close to the numbers held by the US and Russia. However, Beijing has already reached this goal and has started placing nuclear missiles in new silos. China has also stopped talks with the US on nuclear safety, like informing each other on missile tests or setting up hotlines to prevent incidents from turning into nuclear conflicts. During the Cold War, the US used different strategies against the Soviet Union, such as peaceful evolution, an arms race, and the Star Wars program. The goal was to reduce the Soviet nuclear stockpile. For example, by 1994, through programs like the Nunn-Lugar program, the US helped cut Soviet warheads from 45,000 to 10,000, with the West spending nearly $10 billion. From these past lessons, we can see that the US current nuclear strategy is not just about being ready to strike China, Russia, and North Korea all at once, it's also about reducing China's nuclear arsenal. Unless China completely dismantles its nuclear weapons, the US may take stronger actions. China's leaders are aware of this and are likely discussing how to respond, but it's unlikely they'll come back down easily. The CCP's past actions against Li Keqiang show they will remove any internal threats and eliminate anyone who might compromise with the US or the West. President Biden allowed the New York Times to reveal its strategic shift. This shows the US now views China, Russia, and North Korea as an axis of evil and sees them as top national security threats. This position is not expected to change for a long time, no matter who is president. Why has the US placed China, Russia, and North Korea in the same strategic category as the former Soviet Union? From the US perspective, these three nations together pose a serious national security threat. China's nuclear forces alone may not directly threaten the US, but China is actively looking for ways to gain a strategic advantage. For instance, China has been buying farmland near US military base and air defense networks. It might use these locations to deploy AI and hypersonic drones. These drones could quickly strike US air defense radars, delaying responses and creating opening for Russian missiles. China has also been using cyber attacks, viruses, and high-altitude balloons to infiltrate the US. It's important to understand that Xi Jinping's regime is built on the goal of defeating the US and achieving the Chinese dream. The idea of not forgetting the original mission refers to winning this confrontation and bringing about what they call great changes unseen in a century. To achieve this, Xi has tightened controls of the party and the military. China's so-called openness and investment in the US might just be tactics to mislead its adversaries. China has also secretly trained many AI drones and its Milan base in Loop Nur, Xinjiang. These drones are intended to launch surprise attacks on the US military sites. If an attack happens, China could deny involvement. Furthermore, the PLA Military Academy has a department focused on studying strategies to achieve victory over the US. These developments require close attention. Historically, the US gave China plenty of time and opportunities. During the Cold War, China and the US worked together against the Soviet Union. In the 1970s, China has one of the world's largest aid recipients, benefiting from Japan and the West. Japan provided 66.9% of China's aid and helped train 37,000 technical personnel. The US and the UK also provided significant military aid. In 1975, with US support, the UK signed a £500 million agreement with China to transfer spy engine technology, which improved China's aircraft and destroyers. In 1984, President Reagan allowed China to benefit from the Foreign Military Sales Program, which encouraged the transfer of technology from several Western countries. Yet, China claims it achieved in a few decades what took over other nations centuries. The US spent decades trying to integrate China into the global system, hoping for cooperation. However, China used this opportunity to export oppression, aggression, and anti-Americanism. The CCP's rise in military and economic power has come at the expense of global freedom and democracy. Today, both US political parties agree that trusting communist China is no longer an option. The free world's efforts to contain China has spread to South Asia and Southeast Asia. Countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam are experiencing leadership changes that may not be favorable to China. Thailand's former Prime Minister, Thaksin Shinawatra, and his daughter Yingluck have long been considered pro-China. However, since Yingluck took office after the recent election, she hasn't fully aligned with China's expectations. In Vietnam, pro-American former leader Nguyen Phuong Truong's sudden death and the rise of Su Lin may seem like a win for China, but this political shift likely involved eliminating internal opponents, which could create resistance that harms China's interest. Laos and Cambodia seem stable for now, but they could change suddenly, like Bangladesh did. In the Philippines, the political climate has shifted entirely against communism, and Indonesia is undergoing gradual changes. In Malaysia, political battles are fought through elections due to historical reasons. The main battleground now are Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam, three countries that border China. Regarding Myanmar, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has openly supported the military junta. Meanwhile, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Myanmar's armed resistance forces, signaling Washington's intent to help overthrow the junta. The goal is clear: to bring Myanmar under control. The free world strategy is to gradually take control of nations bordering China. These regions will play a crucial role when the time comes to counter China. This is the essence of the US return to the Indo-Pacific strategy. In fact, as early as 2015 to 2016, the US recognized the threat posed by China and began planning to reclaim the Indo-Pacific region. Given the strategic importance of these nations and the shifting situation, Xi Jinping must personally monitor these developments. In response, the US has been stepping up its military preparations. Recently, the US Air Force launched an upgrade version of its Red Flag exercises called Bamboo Eagle on an unprecedented scale. The exercises targeted China. A variety of aircraft took part, including F-22 stealth fighters, F-35As, F-15s, F-16s, and B-1B and B-52 strategic bombers. Additionally, C-130 transport planes, E-3 AWACS, C-17 transport planes, and RC-135 electronic resonance aircraft were involved. The US Navy and Marine Corps also played active roles. The focus of these exercises was training for a full-scale war with China, especially how US forces would coordinate during such a conflict. The core of conventional warfare lies in the operational efficiency and the overall system's ability to function. The US military understands this well, and recent exercises focused on key aspects like transporting and loading ammunition, command and control, position targeting, battlefield awareness, and coordination between ground and air forces. The US military constantly uses past battlefield failures or problems as focal points in their exercises, improving their performance every time. In contrast, the Chinese military seems more focused on pointing out past US failures such as the Vietnam and Korean Wars. However, they might not fully realize that the US has learned from these defeats. The US military has carefully studied these failures and compiled detailed reports which are used at West Point to teach future soldiers how to avoid the same mistakes. Meanwhile, the Chinese military content with small victories may not be making real progress. A more concerning issue is how China handles problems. In China, major incidents are often covered up and the underlying issues remain unresolved. For instance, during the floods in Zhengzhou and Hunan, the CCP controlled information to hide the truth. But on the battlefield, there is no room to cover up. The deception in China's military industry will eventually be exposed during actual combat, potentially leading to serious failures. Meanwhile, Taiwan is actively preparing for conflict. On August 20th, Taiwan held a missile test at a secret site in the southeast. They fired Patriot 2 and Skybow 3 surface-to-air missiles. 5 live missiles were launched during the exercise, and for the first time, journalists were invited to observe, demonstrating Taiwan's well-trained defense forces and reliable equipment. Taiwan isn't just preparing military. The island is also working to raise public awareness of a potential war with China. For example, Taiwan recently released a board game called 2045 based on a Taiwan Strait war scenario to help the public understand the stakes of a possible invasion. All these developments show the global situation is becoming more intense and dangerous. The free world appears to be shifting from a defensive stance to a more proactive approach, with all sides preparing for potential conflict. China's aggressive policies, both internationally and domestically, are taking a toll on its society. Various disasters are affecting every aspect of people's lives. During the pandemic, China's strict lockdown measures severely impacted the quality of education for university students. Many graduates are now struggling to find jobs. For example, in Guangzhou, Jiangxi, a father and daughter were arrested for distributing prostitution cards driven by financial desperation. In another case, a female student in Guangzhou was caught engaging in prostitution, tearfully pleading with authorities not to confiscate her earnings, which she was saving for her father's medical treatment. Unlike countries such as the US, Japan, and several in Europe, which provided financial aid during lockdowns, China offered no such relief. Meanwhile, debt collectors and landlords continued to pressure people and show no signs of stopping. Age remains a critical factor in marriage for women, and 3 years of lockdowns left many women unmarried. In Chongqing, the number of unmarried older women has surpassed 1 million. Many parents are now offering large dowries, including houses and cars, hoping to help their daughter marry quickly. Economic difficulties have brought about the more extreme social phenomenon of starvation. In Kengshan, Suzhou, a young man died in the street after going hungry for a long time. In a poor village in Ningxia, a young woman born in the 1990s worked hard and got into a top university in Beijing. After graduating, she placed first in the written exams for local civil services job several times, but was always rejected in interviews. In April, she went to Xi'an to look for work. By early June, she died of starvation in her rented apartment. Her body was not found until about 20 days later. Before her death, she cut off contact with her family. In March, at a funeral home in Shanghai, a young man threw his father's ashes straight into a trash bin after the cremation. Events like this show that in extreme situations, family ties and moral values are under immense strains like never before. New data and analysis show that the death toll during the pandemic may be much higher than the government's reported. Recently, a chemistry researcher in Guangzhou revealed that in December 2020 alone, 10 million people died. By 2024, the total number of deaths, including those caused by long-term complications, could be over 100 million. A female mortician also shared internal figures stating that at least 300 million people have died across the country in recent years. Internal data from funeral homes suggest that over 200 million deaths have been recorded nationwide. Estimates from both domestic and international sources suggest that China's actual population could be as low as 1 billion, much less than the 1.4 billion the government claims. It's important to note that even students at China's top university, like those in the 985 and 211 projects, are under enormous pressure. A recent internal presentation leaked online showed that these students are considered little more than gut microbiome donors for the country's elites. There are widespread rumors that China is on the verge of major political changes, but these changes will not be immediate. Globally, the situation is tense, with the threat of war looming. Domestically, both natural and human-made disasters are increasing, and people's living standards continue to fall. These signs are not hopeful and instead point to the possibility that the Chinese Communist Party will instigate even more repression, conflict, and instability. We must stay alert and prepare for all possibilities, including the worst-case scenarios. This warning applies not only to Chinese citizens, but to the global community as well.